The morning sun crept slowly over the quiet docks of Norfolk, Virginia, painting the fishing boats in gold. The salty air carried the faint hum of diesel engines, seagulls, and waves lapping softly against wooden piers. It was a calm kind of life, one that Megan Walsh had built carefully, piece by piece, after years of chaos. Her food truck, the Harbor Bite, sat parked near the loading zone, a thin column of steam rising from the griddle. The smell of sizzling bacon and buttered toast filled the air, drawing in the usual crowd of fishermen, dock workers, and delivery drivers. Megan moved with precise efficiency, flipping eggs, toasting buns, and filling coffee cups as if each motion were part of a silent drill. She wore no makeup, her brown hair tied in a low braid beneath a navy cap. Her blue eyes were calm but sharp, the kind of eyes that missed nothing. People liked her, though few knew much about her. To them, she was simply the lady with the best breakfast sandwiches on the pier. But those who paid attention noticed things. The way she scanned her surroundings every few minutes. How her back was never fully turned to the crowd, and how she never flinched at loud noises, though her jaw sometimes tightened when a truck backfired. No one knew that Megan had once worn the trident, the insignia of a U.S. Navy SEAL, 5 years ago. She had been part of a small SEAL team stationed overseas, one of the few women to make it through the grueling training pipeline. She had seen deserts, jungles, and oceans under moonlight. She had rescued hostages, lost friends, and lived through things most people could never imagine. But war leaves invisible marks. After 12 years of service, she retired, honorably, quietly, without ceremony. "I've had enough," she told her commanding officer. "I just want peace." So she bought a food truck with her savings, parked it by the sea, and tried to build a life far away from gunfire and sandstorms. It worked for a while. The early shift came and went. She served fishermen heading out to sea, handed breakfast to dockhands, and shared small talk that kept the world light. She didn't mind the routine. It kept her grounded. But sometimes, when she leaned on the counter between customers, her mind drifted. She'd remember things she tried not to. The face of a teammate who never came home, the sharp crack of a rifle echoing through dust, the metallic scent of adrenaline. Her hands would pause for a heartbeat. Then she'd exhale slowly, grounding herself in the present. The hiss of the grill, the scent of coffee, the sea breeze on her face. She told herself, this is peace. This is enough. That evening, after cleaning the truck, she parked it near her small rented home, a quiet place on the edge of town surrounded by pine trees and silence. She locked up, showered, made tea, and sat by the window, listening to the rhythmic hum of crickets. Her life had no danger now, no missions, no orders, no reasons to fight. But part of her still felt uneasy, as if waiting for something she couldn't name. Megan had learned long ago that danger rarely announced itself. It crept in softly, disguised as coincidence, wrapped in routine. She didn't know that her next encounter with violence would begin with something as simple as running out of milk. The rain began around 8 p.m., a slow drizzle that turned into a steady downpour. Megan sighed, glancing at the empty milk jug on her counter. The storm didn't bother her. She'd seen worse. She grabbed her jacket, keys, and a grocery list, and drove her old Ford pickup toward the nearest gas station. The streets were nearly empty, washed in orange from the streetlights. Windshield wipers squeaked rhythmically as she navigated puddles. It was one of those nights when most people stayed home, when the world seemed paused. The gas station sat on a corner by the highway, a lonely building with flickering lights and one attendant inside. Megan parked beside a pump and stepped out, hood up, hands in pockets. She started fueling up, her mind half on the list and half on the storm. Inside the station's glass windows, 2 young men loitered near the aisles. They looked no older than 20, rough clothes, hungry faces, nervous energy. They weren't shopping. They were waiting. Megan noticed them through the reflection in the glass as she filled her tank. She didn't stare, just observed. The way one kept glancing outside, the way the other adjusted something under his jacket. Small details, but her instincts filed them instantly. Most people would have ignored it. Megan couldn't. When she finished fueling, she went inside to grab groceries, milk, bread, a few supplies. She moved with casual purpose, never showing awareness of the two men, though every step was deliberate. As she approached the counter to pay, she saw one of them whisper to the other. Their eyes flicked toward her pickup truck outside, where her bag of cash from the day's sales sat behind the seat. Her mind sharpened, her senses heightening, not fear, but focus. She paid, smiled politely at the attendant, and walked back out into the rain. The lot was empty except for her truck and the faint rumble of thunder in the distance. She placed the groceries in the passenger seat, closed the door, and turned toward the driver's side. That's when she saw them, standing by the edge of the building, watching her. The taller one took a step forward. His hand dipped into his jacket pocket. The shorter one looked jittery, glancing left and right. Megan's training kicked in, calm and analytical. Two suspects, both nervous. One armed, right hand dominant. Limited cover. Distance 15 feet. No backup, don't escalate. She opened her door slowly, pretending not to notice. Her voice inside whispered, "Stay calm. Watch the hands." Rain pattered against the pavement. The taller man's hand came out. No weapon yet, but the movement was unmistakable. Megan's pulse slowed, not sped. It was a familiar clarity, the kind that came just before impact in combat. Every detail felt amplified. The sound of water dripping from the roof, the smell of gasoline, the faint hum of a fluorescent bulb overhead. She had lived this rhythm before, only this time there was no uniform, no team, no mission. Just her. She got into the truck, locked the doors, and started the engine. The men hesitated, whispering. Then, realizing they were losing their chance, they began moving toward her again. Megan glanced at them once more through the rain-speckled glass, and in that split second, she knew. This wasn't random. They were desperate. Maybe hungry. Maybe high. But desperation and guns were a lethal mix. Her instincts whispered, "This won't end with words." Still, she hoped she was wrong. She turned off the engine, rolled down her window halfway, and called out, "You two need something?" The taller one froze, then smiled nervously, hiding his right hand again. "Yeah. We were just wondering if you could spare some food." She nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his. "I've got some leftovers. Stay there, I'll bring them." Her tone was steady, kind even. But behind it, every muscle in her body was coiled. Years of training lived in that calm, the storm behind the silence. As she reached into her truck, she whispered to herself, "Not tonight. Don't make me do this." But deep down, she knew what was coming. That quiet life she had built, the peace she had fought so hard to keep, was about to collide head-on with her past. And when it did, the world would see exactly what a SEAL could do. Rain lashed harder against the roof of the small gas station, drumming like restless fingers on metal. The dim fluorescent lights flickered overhead, throwing long shadows across the cracked pavement. Megan Walsh sat behind the wheel of her truck, engine idling, watching the two young men through the smeared windshield. They stood near the building's edge, half sheltered from the storm. The taller one leaned, jittery, maybe 22, kept glancing at her truck like a predator gauging distance. His partner, smaller but twitchier, rubbed his arms and muttered something she couldn't hear. Their movements weren't random. They were plotting. Megan's instincts sharpened. Her training, buried under layers of civilian life, came alive as naturally as breathing. She catalogued everything: their postures, their hands, their proximity to cover. One had something heavy in his pocket. Gun, maybe. Knife, at least. She took a slow breath and exhaled, letting her pulse steady. Fear didn't control her, it focused her. She remembered the phrase her SEAL instructor used to say, "In chaos, the calm one wins." Megan turned off the ignition. The storm muffled everything else thunder in the distance, the hiss of tires on wet asphalt, a dog barking somewhere far away. She wasn't looking for trouble. She had faced men with rifles, insurgents with explosives, situations where one breath meant death. But this was different. Civilian world danger was messy, unpredictable, desperate. And desperate people were the hardest to control. She opened her door slowly, stepped into the rain, and pretended to recheck her gas cap. Her movement drew their eyes. The taller man nudged his friend. "Hey, lady," he called out. His voice cracked between confidence and fear. Megan looked up calm, her hood dripping. "Yeah? Got any cash? Food?" "We've been out here for hours," he said, trying to sound harmless. Her eyes flicked to his jacket pocket. The outline of a small pistol glinted under the station light when the fabric shifted. Her stomach tightened. "Got some sandwiches in the truck," she replied evenly. "You hungry?" They exchanged a glance. The smaller one smirked. "Yeah, we're hungry," he said, his tone colder now. Megan nodded slowly, walked back to her truck, and opened the passenger side door. Inside, she reached for a paper bag, but her eyes stayed locked on the reflections in the window's glass. They were coming closer. Her breathing stayed measured. She wasn't panicking. She was planning. Every inch of her body remembered how to move, how to react. The rain slicked her jacket, making it cling to her shoulders, but she barely felt it. The taller man stopped 5 feet away. His voice dropped lower. "We'll take whatever you got," he said, eyes narrowing. "Cash too." Megan straightened slowly, closing the truck door behind her. She could smell the metallic tongue of wet concrete, could feel the energy-shifting predator and prey switching places without anyone realizing it yet. "I don't want trouble," she said softly. "You can walk away right now." He smiled, a twitchy, reckless grin. "Not asking, lady." Then the gun came out. It wasn't dramatic, no shouting, no cinematic slow motion. Just a fast, nervous pull. The pistol trembled in his hand, rain sliding down the barrel. His finger was already inside the trigger guard. Megan's eyes locked on it immediately, on the safety, the grip, the hesitation in his stance. She had faced men like him before. Men who thought the weapon gave them power. The smaller one circled to her left, blocking her retreat. He grabbed the grocery bag from her hand and kicked at her foot. "Hurry up," he barked, trying to sound tough, his voice thin with nerves. Megan raised her hand slightly. "You're making a mistake," she said, tone flat, controlled. "Shut up." The gunman snapped. The gun wavered, dipping slightly toward her chest. His grip was sloppy, his stance too wide. To anyone else, those details meant nothing. To Megan, they were everything. She could see where his balance was weak, where his wrist could be broken, where she could move before he even registered. But she didn't act yet. Timing, she thought. Always timing. She took a half step back, pretending to tremble. Okay. Just take it easy." The smaller one snatched her wallet from her jacket pocket and started rifling through it. His hands shook so much the cards spilled onto the wet ground. "You're not from around here, are you?" The gunman sneered. "You got that fancy truck, that food business. You think you're better than us?" Megan's eyes lifted slowly to his. "No," she said. I just work hard." Thunder rolled, low and distant. The taller man laughed harshly, mistaking her calm for fear. "Work hard, huh? Let's see how hard you work when you don't got." He never finished. In the space between one raindrop and the next, Megan moved. Her right foot pivoted. Her left hand struck the barrel, deflecting it upward. The gun fired a deafening crack, splitting the night, but the bullet vanished into the storm. Before the man could react, she grabbed his wrist, twisted it outward, and drove her palm into his elbow joint. A wet pop echoed. He screamed, the gun tumbling from his hand. Megan's other hand came up like lightning, striking his throat just below the jawline. His breath caught. He fell backward into a puddle. The second man shouted, lunging at her with the grocery bag still clutched in his fist. She sidestepped, swept his leg with her heel, and sent him crashing onto the asphalt. The entire fight lasted less than 5 seconds. The gun skittered across the ground, landing under a parked car. Megan stepped back, rain pounding against her face, her breathing calm but her muscles tight with adrenaline. The taller man writhed on the ground, clutching his arm, gasping. The smaller one tried to crawl away, but she stepped forward, pressed her boot gently but firmly against his shoulder. "Stay down," she ordered quietly. Both obeyed instantly. The storm howled. For a long moment, the only sounds were rain and shallow breathing. The gas station lights flickered again, painting the scene in flashes of white and shadow. Megan bent down, picked up her wallet, and tucked it back into her pocket. Her hands didn't shake. They never did. The gunman looked up at her, terrified now, realizing she hadn't even broken a sweat. What are you?" he croaked. She stared down at him, rain streaming down her face. "Someone you should have left alone." She turned away and kicked the gun farther under the car, out of reach. Her heart was pounding, but her expression stayed calm. The adrenaline felt familiar, too familiar. She hated that it still felt like home. Inside the gas station, the clerk had ducked behind the counter, eyes wide. He'd seen everything through the window, but had been too afraid to move. Megan walked inside, dripping wet. "Call the police," she said. "Tell them 2 men tried to rob me. They're still outside." The attendant just nodded, fumbling for the phone, mouth open in shock. Are you okay?" he stammered. She looked at him, her gaze distant. "Yeah," she said after a pause. "I've been worse." When the blue and red lights finally arrived, Megan was standing under the overhang, arms folded. The 2 men sat handcuffed in the rain, heads bowed. The officers took statements, confused by the scene they found. No victims. No injuries except a dislocated arm. And one calm woman who had done what trained men sometimes couldn't. "Mom," one officer said hesitantly, You got military background or something?" Megan smiled faintly. "Something like that." They didn't press further. As the patrol cars pulled away, she stood alone beside her truck. The night was quiet again, except for the steady drip of water from the roof. She leaned against the hood, closed her eyes, and exhaled slowly. The storm inside her hadn't passed yet. For years, she'd buried that part of herself, the fighter, the tactician, the soldier. She had promised she'd never use it again. But peace had never been a guarantee. In that gas station parking lot, she had been reminded of something brutal and simple. She might have left the seals, but the seal in her had never left. Rainwater still streamed from the awning when the police cruisers rolled away. Their red and blue lights faded into the distance, leaving behind the echo of sirens and the smell of wet asphalt. The gas station lot was quiet again, but it wasn't peaceful. Peace, Megan realized, had a price. She stood by her truck, arms crossed tightly, the muscles in her shoulders still tense. The adrenaline hadn't yet left her bloodstream. Her pulse still thudded faintly in her ears. The world looked hyperreal, the reflection of lights on puddles, the smell of rain-soaked diesel, the metallic chill of the air. Moments ago, she'd moved like instinct, not thought. Every action had been precise. Neutralize the threat, control the weapon, disable the assailant. It was second nature. It was what she had been built for. Now, with silence settling over the parking lot, the weight of it began to sink in. She leaned against her truck door, exhaled deeply, and looked at her hands. They weren't shaking, but they felt heavy. She flexed them once, as if trying to release ghosts that clung to her skin. The gas station attendant, a nervous kid barely in his 20s, peeked out through the door. "Ma'am?" he asked timidly. "You sure you're okay?" Megan nodded without looking up. "Yeah, I'm fine." But she wasn't. Inside, memories stirred. The flash of a muzzle in a dark alley overseas. The heat of adrenaline. The sharp sound of a shot that wasn't meant to hit her, but almost did. She'd left that life behind. She'd sworn she would never have to feel that again. She shut her eyes for a moment. The rain eased into a drizzle. Somewhere nearby, thunder grumbled and faded toward the horizon. Megan picked up her groceries from where they'd spilled and loaded them into the truck again. She hesitated before sliding into the driver's seat. For a brief second, she stared at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her own face looked like a stranger's, focused, cold, unreadable. "You're not that person anymore," she told herself silently. "You're done fighting." But deep down, she wasn't sure she believed it. By the time she reached home, it was past midnight. The storm had drifted out to sea, leaving the streets glistening under street lamps. Her little cottage looked untouched by the chaos. She'd just come from warm light from the porch, the smell of wet pine from the woods behind. She parked, sat in silence for a moment, then cut the engine. Inside, she changed into dry clothes and made herself tea. Her reflection in the kitchen window was dark against the glass. Outside, only mist and the whisper of rain on leaves. She replayed the event in her head, every motion, every sound. The way the gun had tilted downward, the way her hand had struck, the way the kid had screamed. They had been kids, barely older than recruits. And that realization hurt more than she expected. She carried her mug to the porch and sat on the steps. The cool night air helped her breathing slow. She sipped her tea and watched the fog crawl along the ground like ghosts returning to sea. She didn't regret what she'd done. If she hadn't acted, someone would have died. But what unsettled her was how easily she'd slipped back into that state, the soldier's mindset. Calm, efficient, unflinching. In combat, she used to call it the switch. The moment when emotion shuts off and training takes over. Tonight, that switch had flipped effortlessly. And that scared her. Her phone buzzed on the porch railing. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Ms. Walsh?" A man's voice asked. "This is Officer Jensen, Norfolk PD. Sorry to call late. We just wanted to confirm some details for the report." "Sure," she said quietly. He asked her a few routine questions. Time of arrival, number of suspects, sequence of events. Her answers were calm and precise. When they finished, he hesitated. "Ma'am, not to pry, but those moves you pulled? That wasn't just self-defense training. You ever serve?" There it was. Megan's lips curved slightly. "Something like that. Well, whatever it was, you probably saved your own life, and maybe theirs too. Those kids weren't thinking straight." "I know," she said softly. "Desperation makes people dangerous." He sighed. "Anyway, you did good, Miss Walsh. Just thought you should know." When the call ended, she set the phone down and stared into the dark. "You did good." The words didn't comfort her. They never did. Sleep didn't come easy that night. When she finally closed her eyes, her mind played tricks. She was back in a desert, gunfire echoing, dust in her throat. Her teammates' voices shouted over radio static. Then a flash, a sound too close. She woke up gasping, heart racing. She sat up, running a hand over her face. Her body was in her bed, but her mind was still overseas. "Stop," she whispered. "You're home." She turned on the light and went to the kitchen for water. On the counter sat her folded Navy SEAL cap, something she'd kept tucked away in a box for years. She stared at it for a long moment. Peace had always been the goal, but now she wondered, was it ever truly possible for someone who had lived through war? Morning came gray and heavy. Megan drove her truck to the docks as usual. Work was the best medicine she knew, something to keep her hands busy and her mind occupied. But the moment she opened the harbor bite, the whisper started. "Hey, you hear about last night?" One fisherman said to another. "Some woman took down 2 guys at the gas station. Heard she disarmed one with a gun." Megan kept her back turned, pretending not to listen. "Crazy," the other replied. "Who does that?" She flipped bacon on the grill, eyes on the sizzling pan. Her movements were steady, but her pulse quickened. Word had spread faster than she hoped. An older dock worker, Jack, approached the counter with a coffee mug in hand. "Morning, Megan. You hear about that robbery?" he said, leaning in. 2 punks tried to rob a lady near the highway. Got their butts handed to them. She smiled faintly. "That right?" "Yeah. Cops said she handled herself like a pro. Bet she's ex-military or something." "Maybe," she said quietly, sliding him his breakfast sandwich. Jack nodded appreciatively and walked off, still rambling about the story. Megan sighed, wiping her hands on a towel. Her peace had survived the night, but barely. Later that day, when she parked her truck near the water, she took a walk along the dock. The waves slapped gently against the wooden posts. Gulls wheeled overhead, calling sharply in the wind. She leaned against the railing and stared at the horizon. All her life, she had trained to protect, to act decisively when no one else could. But that same training had taken her far from the softness of ordinary life. People feared violence. She understood it, controlled it, lived with it. She thought of the 2 men again, their shaking hands, their hungry eyes. Somewhere, someone had failed them long before that night. And for a fleeting moment, she felt pity. But pity didn't erase what had happened. That evening, when she closed her food truck, she received another call. This time, it was from a number she recognized but hadn't seen in years. "Walsh," said a gravelly voice on the line. "You haven't changed." She froze. "Commander Rains?" He chuckled softly. "Word travels fast, even off duty. Heard you stopped a robbery with your bare hands. Guess retirement's not slowing you down." She sighed. "I didn't want it, sir. They gave me no choice." "I know," he said. "Still, you did what you had to. You always did." There was a pause, the kind that carried unspoken memories. "Megan," he said finally, "you can't run from who you are. You can try, but when it counts, you'll always be one of us." The line went quiet. She stood there for a long time after hanging up, listening to the soft crash of the waves. He was right. She had tried to leave that life, but it was in her bones, her blood, her instincts. The world could take the SEAL out of uniform, but it could never take the fight out of the SEAL. The morning air was sharp and still. The harbor was wrapped in a soft fog that smelled of salt and diesel. Megan moved through her routine like clockwork, unlatching the food truck, turning on the small grill, brewing coffee that cut through the cold. She'd convinced herself the chaos of the gas station was over. that the world would settle again into its rhythm. But the world had other plans. Around noon, business picked up. Fishermen, dock workers, and tourists lined up for her crab rolls and chowder. The hum of conversation filled the air until it didn't. Because Megan noticed something first. A black SUV idling near the edge of the parking lot, tinted windows gleaming under the weak sun. She frowned. Same make and color as the one from that night. Coincidence, maybe. But her instincts whispered otherwise. A minute later, two men stepped out. She recognized them instantly. Same swagger, same cold look in their eyes. Only this time, they weren't desperate or hungry. They were angry. Her pulse slowed, not quickened. The seal in her, the part she tried to bury, began to wake up. They didn't make a scene at first. They waited until the line thinned. Then one of them approached her counter, leaning on it with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, well," he said softly. "Didn't think we'd find you this easy." Megan didn't look up. "You should have stayed gone." He laughed. "You cost us a lot that night. My brother's in the hospital. Broken ribs, busted nose. Cops say it was self-defense, but I call it something else." She finally met his eyes steady, unflinching. "Then call it a lesson." He leaned closer, voice low. "We're going to take back what you owe us. Food truck, cash, whatever. Maybe more." She set the spatula down. Her voice was calm. "You should walk away right now." He grinned. "Or what? You gonna pull another Marine move on me?" Her lips tightened. "SEAL? What?" "I was a SEAL." He blinked, confused, then scoffed. "Yeah, right? Women don't." He didn't finish. In one fluid motion, she reached across the counter, gripped his wrist, and twisted. The knife he'd been trying to pull flashed once, before clattering to the ground. She pushed him back hard enough that he stumbled. His partner cursed, reaching into his jacket. Megan's voice dropped to a command tone sharp, cold, unmistakably military. "Don't even think about it." He froze. The way she said it, the authority, the precision made him hesitate. His hand hovered over the weapon, but didn't move. Around them, the dock went dead silent. Then, chaos. The first man lunged again. She sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and slammed him into the truck door. Her elbow came down hard, controlled, efficient. He crumpled. The second one panicked, pulling his gun halfway out. Megan kicked the side of the counter, knocking the barrel upward before he could aim. The shot went wild, hitting a fishing post. Screams erupted from nearby customers. Someone ducked behind crates. Megan moved fast, one hand on the gun, twisting it free, the other pushing him back. The weapon hit the ground, and she kicked it out of reach. He swung at her in frustration. She blocked, then countered with a clean strike to the solar plexus hard enough to drop him, but not kill him. She stood over them, chest heaving, eyes burning cold. "This is your second warning," she said evenly. "Next time you don't get one." Police sirens howled in the distance again. Someone must have called 911. The men groaned on the ground. One tried to crawl toward the gun, but Megan pinned him with her boot. "Don't," she said quietly. When officers arrived, they found her standing guard, arms crossed, the picture of calm dominance. "Ma'am," an officer said, stepping forward cautiously. "You again?" She nodded slightly. "Same two from the robbery." "They followed me." The cops exchanged glances. "You disarmed both?" Megan looked down at them, then back up. "They left me no choice." One of the officers exhaled, shaking his head. "What are you?" She didn't answer, just looked toward the horizon, where the ocean stretched wide and endless. Hours later, after statements and reports, the dock quieted again. The SUV was towed. The men were gone, but the adrenaline still coursed through her. She sat on the edge of the pier, boots dangling above the water. Her reflection rippled in the gentle waves, steady, composed, but underneath. Haunted, because this time was different. This wasn't a random act of defense. This was a confrontation born of vengeance. And she'd met it head on. She'd shown them what a seal could do. But she also reminded herself what that meant, what it cost to be that person again. She didn't notice the older man walking up until he spoke. "You move like someone who's done this before," said Jack, her dock worker regular. She glanced at him, smirking faintly. "You could say that." He sat beside her, resting his elbows on his knees. Heard the stories. Didn't believe him. "Now I do." "I didn't want this," she said quietly. "Any of it. I just wanted a quiet life." Jack shrugged. "You can take the soldier out of war, but not the war out of the soldier. World's still dangerous, Megan. We need people like you, even if you don't want to be needed." His words lingered long after he left. That night, Megan cleaned the inside of her truck in silence. Every clang of a metal tray echoed like a memory. Every motion felt heavier than it should. Finally, she turned off the lights and sat in the driver's seat. The dashboard glowed faintly. Her hands rested on the wheel. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Commander Rains. Saw the footage. "You still got it. Come see me." She stared at the screen for a long moment before turning it face down. No, she thought. I'm done. But deep down, she knew she wasn't. Not really. Because something in her had awakened again, something powerful, disciplined, and unwilling to stay buried. The next morning, she returned to the harbor early, before sunrise. The world was still gray-blue, the water calm as glass. She stood by the edge of the pier and whispered to herself, I didn't ask for the fight, but if it finds me, I'll finish it. Then she smiled faintly, the kind of smile that came from someone who'd seen darkness and learned how to control it. She picked up a crate, carried it to the truck, and began another day. Because no matter what life threw at her, Megan Walsh had already proven the truth. You can try to steal her peace. You can even point a gun at her. But you can't steal the warrior in her blood. That's what a SEAL can do? 2 days after the dock fight, the harbor didn't feel the same. Megan noticed it in the way people looked at her, longer, quieter, curious. Conversation stopped when she passed by. Some faces held admiration. Others held fear. She'd tried to brush it off, to bury herself in routine, but the whispers followed her like a shadow. Is that her? The SEAL lady? Yeah, the one who fought off those guys at the docks. Did you see the video? It's all over TikTok. That last part made her freeze the first time she heard it. Video? That evening, she sat in her small living room, laptop open on the coffee table. A local news channel headline blinked across the screen. Former Navy SEAL foils armed attack at harbor, second incident in a week. The thumbnail was a blurry clip from someone's phone. But even through the poor lighting and chaos, she recognized herself, calm, efficient, unstoppable. She watched the video once, then again, then closed the laptop. This was bad. She had gone years keeping her life low profile, avoiding attention, moving quietly. Now her face was on every local newsfeed. And if they were watching, the people she once worked for, or worse, the ones she crossed paths with overseas, it wouldn't take long before someone came looking. She sat back, running a hand through her hair. The quiet hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. You did it again, she whispered to herself. You couldn't just walk away. But walking away was never easy for someone like her. Not when people were in danger. The next morning, a knock came at the door. 3 short raps, measured, deliberate. Not the kind a stranger makes. Megan's instincts flared. She reached for the small pistol she kept holstered under the side table. Habit, not paranoia. When she opened the door, the man standing outside was exactly who she feared it might be. "Commander Rains," she said. He smiled faintly, gray at the temples now, but his eyes still sharp as ever. "You didn't call back." "I didn't plan to. I figured." He stepped inside without waiting for permission, glancing around her modest living space. "You've been busy. Or should I say, the internet's been busy for you." Megan sighed. "I didn't want this attention." "Doesn't matter what you wanted," Rains said. "You've got it. And you know what comes next." She folded her arms. "I'm not going back, if that's what you're asking." Rains chuckled quietly. "You really think this is about recruitment?" "No, Walsh. This is about cleanup." "Cleanup?" He leaned on the counter. "The men you took down?" "One of them used to run errands for a trafficking outfit." "You didn't just stop a robbery. You disrupted business. Now those people are angry, and they know your name." Her jaw tightened. "How?" "Your video. News coverage. You're trending, for God's sake." She turned away, pacing slowly. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying you need protection. Or you get out of town for a while. Witness protection's off the table, but I can make a few calls." Megan stopped and looked at him. "You think I'm running from them?" Rains gave a knowing half-smile. "I think you're not built to run. But don't confuse pride for strategy. These people don't fight fair." When he left, the air in her house felt heavier. She poured herself coffee and stared out the window at the quiet street. Somewhere in that calm suburbia, danger was already moving toward her. She could feel it, the way trained soldiers feel a shift in the wind before an ambush. She tried to focus on work, but customers came in waves, some asking for autographs, some asking questions she didn't want to answer. "Are you really a Navy SEAL? Did you really disarm 2 men with your bare hands? Can you teach my daughter self-defense?" She smiled politely, but her patience was thinning. The story wasn't inspiring to her. It was a warning. That night, she closed early and took a drive. The highway stretched long and empty, moonlight glinting on wet asphalt. The world outside her truck window was quiet, too quiet. She stopped at an old rest area, the kind that had a single flickering street lamp and a vending machine that hadn't worked in years. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You made a mistake. Should have stayed out of it." She stared at the screen, every nerve in her body going alert. Another message followed seconds later. "We know who you are, SEAL." Her hand tightened on the steering wheel. She glanced around, empty road, dark woods, distant hum of the highway. Nothing. Yet her instincts told her she wasn't alone. She hit the ignition and sped back toward town, eyes flicking between mirrors. The black SUV appeared again half a mile later, headlights far behind her, then closer. Too close. Megan's mind snapped into combat mode. She didn't panic. She planned. She slowed just enough to make them think she was scared. Then, at the last second, she veered off onto a narrow service road that wound toward the industrial docks. The SUV followed. Perfect. When the road narrowed, she killed her headlights and braked hard. The SUV's lights shot past her in confusion, fishtailing slightly on the slick gravel. That was her moment. She stepped out quietly, gun drawn, every step calculated. The SUV screeched to a stop ahead. 2 men jumped out. She crouched behind a rusted container, heart steady, mind clear. They were armed, talking low. One moved left, one right. She waited until one came close enough, then stepped out and struck. A swift motion. One disarm, one takedown. His weapon clattered to the ground. She kicked it away, spun, and faced the second. "Drop it," she said. He didn't. The standoff lasted seconds. The decision, half that. He raised his gun. She fired first. One clean shot to the shoulder, non-lethal, but decisive. He dropped instantly, screaming. She approached him, kicked the weapon out of reach, and crouched down. "Tell your boss," she said, voice cold and quiet, "I don't run. I end things." By the time police arrived, called by a witness who heard the gunshot, the men were gone, their SUV abandoned. Only Megan's tire marks and a single shell casing remained. She gave no statement that night. She didn't need to. The cops were starting to understand who she was. At home, she sat on the porch until dawn, staring at the horizon as light broke over the water. The ocean shimmered like steel. She thought about Raines's words. "You can't run from who you are." He was right. She had tried to build a peaceful life. Tried to be ordinary. But maybe peace wasn't about avoiding the fight. Maybe it was about controlling it. When morning came, she made a decision. If these men wanted a fight, she'd bring it to them first. She opened the small footlocker she'd kept buried under her bed for years, the one marked with a faded Navy insignia. Inside lay her old gear, a combat knife, a tactical flashlight, a worn patch that read SEAL Team 5. Her fingers brushed over the patch, and something inside her shifted. The soldier wasn't gone. She had just been sleeping. That night, as the sun sank behind the horizon, Megan loaded her truck. Not with food supplies this time, but with tools, maps, and purpose. The hunter had become the hunted once again. But this time, she wasn't going to wait for the fight to find her. The dawn was cold, pale, and silent, the kind of morning that felt like a held breath before a storm. Megan Walsh stood in her garage, staring at the open trunk of her pickup. Inside lay her old SEAL field bag, its canvas faded but intact. Every item inside had a story, and every story carried weight. She didn't plan on killing anyone. Not yet. But she did plan on finding them, the ones who thought they could follow her, threaten her, pull her back into violence. She zipped the bag and tossed it in the passenger seat. Then she took one last look at her cottage by the bay, the life she had built from quiet mornings and coffee by the water. She didn't know if she'd see it again. With a deep breath, she started the engine. Her first stop was Commander Raines's office, tucked away in a quiet government complex near Norfolk. He wasn't surprised when she walked in. "I knew you wouldn't stay out of it," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I can't," Megan replied. "They're not random thugs. The way they moved, the way they tracked me, that's trained behavior. Someone's paying them." Raines nodded slowly. "You're right. We ran background on the ones you put down at the dock. Their names came up in connection with a group called Black Tide." Megan frowned. Black Tide? He pulled up a file on his computer, rotating the screen toward her. The images that appeared made her stomach tighten. Smuggled weapons, offshore accounts, human trafficking routes that crossed from Africa to the U.S. East Coast. "They're ex-military," Raines said grimly. "Mercenaries for hire. The kind who sell their training to whoever pays most. You hitting their middlemen at the harbor cost them shipments worth millions. Now they want you erased." She leaned closer. "Who's running them?" Raines hesitated, then clicked to a photo. A man's face filled the screen, hard eyes, military haircut, scar running down his jawline. Megan's blood went cold. "Cole Maddox," Raines said. "You served with him in Ramadi, didn't you?" Her throat went dry. She hadn't heard that name in years. Maddox, her former teammate. Brilliant tactician. Ruthless soldier. The one who didn't make it through Final SEAL Command Review, because even back then, He played by his own rules. I thought he was dead, she said quietly. Rains shook his head. He was too smart to die. Disappeared off the grid, started running operations for hire. He's been untouchable for years. Until you messed with his business. Megan's jaw clenched. Then I'll finish it. Rains studied her for a long moment. You sure about that? You walk into this, there's no walking back out. This isn't the service anymore. There's no chain of command, no backup. I don't need backup, she said. I just need a direction. Rains sighed. Then start at the docks north of Chesapeake. That's where Maddox's people move product. And Megan? She paused at the door. Don't underestimate him. You might have been the best on your team, but he was the most dangerous. The Chesapeake docks looked quiet under the afternoon sun. Seagulls circling above, the sound of waves slapping against pilings. But Megan's instincts knew better. Quiet was camouflage. She parked her truck a mile away and approached on foot, blending into the industrial sprawl. From behind a stack of shipping containers, she watched. 2 men on patrol. One lookout with binoculars on a warehouse roof. A black van idling near the loading bay. She moved like shadow, precise, invisible. Every step calculated. Every sound avoided. When the first guard passed, she slipped behind him and tapped his shoulder. He barely turned before she struck. A chokehold, quick and clean. He went limp within seconds. She dragged him behind a crate and took his earpiece. Static crackled softly. Voices spoke in low tones. All clear. Van's ready. Shipment goes out in 20. Maddox wants the girl alive if she shows. The girl. So they were expecting her. She moved closer, crouching behind a forklift. Through a gap between containers, she saw the crates being loaded into the van. Black market rifles, explosives, and something worse. Small metal cases stamped with biohazard warnings. Her stomach turned. Maddox wasn't just smuggling guns. He was smuggling biological material. She pulled her phone and took photos, sending them to Rains with one text. You were right. Maddox is moving bioweapons. Need immediate intercept. Then she slipped closer to the van, listening. That's when she heard a voice that froze her blood. Didn't think you'd come yourself, Walsh. She turned. Cole Maddox stepped from the shadows, a pistol loose in his hand, a smirk on his face. Time hadn't softened him. If anything, he looked sharper, colder. Maddox, she said evenly. Still got that steel in your voice, he replied. You always did like giving orders. Shame the Navy didn't see what I saw. Which was? He smiled thinly. A killer trying to play civilian. Her expression didn't change. You were good once, Cole. You could have made something better of yourself. I did, he said, spreading his arms. Money, power, freedom. You still serving eggs in a truck, pretending you're not what you are. She took a step closer. You think you're free because you sell death for profit? You're still chained to Maddox. Only now your leash is money. His eyes hardened. You always did talk too much. He lifted the gun. Megan Dove left just as the shot cracked through the air. Metal sparked where the bullet hit the container behind her. She rolled, came up in a crouch, and returned fire. One clean shot that forced him behind cover. The men near the van scrambled, shouting. Megan ducked and moved, using the containers as cover. Every motion was instinct, every shot deliberate. She took out one of Maddox's guards with a precise shot to the knee, another with a stunning blow from behind. But Maddox was still ahead, retreating toward the end of the pier, firing as he went. You can't stop this, Walsh. He shouted. This world's built for men like me now. She advanced slowly, calm in the chaos. Maybe, but it's women like me who clean it up. She caught him mid-reload, closed the distance in seconds. The fight turned hand to hand, brutal, close, relentless. He swung first. She blocked, drove an elbow into his ribs, and another strike to his jaw. He staggered back, grabbed a steel pipe, and swung wildly. She ducked, countered, and slammed him into a container wall. He fell to his knees, bleeding, breathing hard. "You always were better," he spat, smiling bitterly. She aimed her gun at him. "I'm not here to kill you, Cole. You're going to answer for what you've done." But before she could move, he laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "You think they'll let me live to talk? You don't understand who I work for." "What do you mean? You think I'm the top?" His grin widened. "I'm just a messenger." Then he reached into his vest. Megan lunged, too late. A small detonator clicked. She dove behind a container as the van exploded, fire and debris tearing through the dock. The blast threw her backward, slamming her into the ground. When she looked up, Maddox was gone. Sirens echoed in the distance. Flames roared high into the sky. Megan's vision blurred from smoke, but one thing was clear. This wasn't over. Maddox had escaped, and worse, someone bigger was behind him. Someone dangerous enough to make a SEAL-turned-mercenary fear for his life. She grabbed her phone, coughing through the smoke, and sent one last message to Rains. "Maddox alive. Van destroyed. There's someone else. Bigger. I'm going after them." Then she stood, wiped blood from her lip, and stared into the burning wreckage. Her quiet life was gone. Her peace was gone. But her purpose, her fight, was clearer than ever. The night was heavy with fog, rolling over the bay like a blanket of gray. Megan sat alone in her truck, parked near a quiet stretch of dock she hadn't used in years. The glow of the dashboard illuminated her face, calm, focused, but shadowed by exhaustion. Her body ached, bruises from the dock fight still tender. Her mind raced. Maddox was dangerous, but he wasn't the real threat. That much was clear from his words before the van exploded. "I'm just a messenger." Someone bigger was orchestrating this. Someone with money, influence, and a network far beyond what she'd imagined. Her fingers danced over her phone, scanning the photos, maps, and files she had gathered over the last days. Every clue led back to a name she hadn't expected. Victor Kane, a former intelligence contractor turned criminal mastermind. His operations were global, shadowy, untouchable. And now he had her attention. She traced his movements through shipping records, satellite images, and financial transfers. Kane's empire was vast. Every port, warehouse, and transport hub on the eastern seaboard had a thread connected to him. He wasn't just trafficking weapons or bioweapons. He was controlling information, manipulating events, and using men like Maddox to carry out his will. Megan exhaled slowly, absorbing the scale. She had faced insurgents and organized crime overseas, but this was different. Kane wasn't a soldier. He was a strategist, someone who played life like chess. And yet, she didn't hesitate. If Kane thought she would run, he was wrong. The next day, she went to a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of Norfolk. Her research had led her there, a hub for black tide shipments. The place was heavily guarded, but Megan approached silently, using shadows, cranes, and shipping containers as cover. Every movement was precise, measured, silent. From a distance, she watched men unload crates, communicate through radios, and move with military precision. It reminded her of Maddox, and worse, the planning reminded her of Kane. She tapped into a nearby security feed, using a device she had stashed in her truck. Screens flickered to life, showing real-time footage from the compound. Guards, patrols, routes, it all became a map in her mind. She analyzed, memorized, and planned. Tonight, she would strike. As darkness fell, she approached again, cloaked in black, armed with her SEAL training and every tool she had packed. The air smelled of diesel, salt, and tension. Her heartbeat was steady, every step calculated. She disabled cameras with precision, moved like a shadow, and neutralized the first two guards with non-lethal strikes. They never knew what hit them. Inside the warehouse, crates of weapons, explosives, and bioweapons were stacked high. She traced their origin, every shipment tied back to Kane. The realization was chilling. This wasn't a local crime ring. It was an empire of death, and she was standing in its heart. Then she saw him, or rather, someone she didn't expect. A familiar face appeared at the far end of the warehouse. Marcus Duvall, her former SEAL teammate. Her breath caught. Marcus had been deployed alongside her in countless operations, trusted with her life. He had once been loyal, fearless, and honorable. But now he was standing among Kane's men, directing operations, armed and dangerous. "Megan," he said, voice low but sharp. "You shouldn't have come here." "You?" Her voice was cold, disbelieving. "Marcus, what the hell are you doing?" He smiled thinly. "I'm alive. You should be thanking me for that. Kane's the future. He's not the enemy. People like him are the solution to chaos. You're just clinging to the past." Her eyes narrowed. "The past? You mean the honor we swore to protect? The people we swore to save? You're betraying all of it." He shrugged. "Survival isn't betrayal. Adaptation is necessary. And you're standing in my way." The moment snapped. Gunfire erupted from the other side of the warehouse. Megan rolled behind a stack of crates, heart steady, training kicking in. Every strike, every movement was instinctive. Marcus fired at her, but she ducked, sliding to cover behind a crate. Her pistol returned precise fire, hitting his arm. He cursed but didn't stop. "You're not the same, Megan," he shouted. "You've let this life consume you. I've survived because of it." She shouted back, moving quickly between cover. "And I'll stop you and Kane, every last one of you." The fight escalated. Guards poured out of hidden doors, but Megan's efficiency was unmatched. She neutralized each threat with precision, using hand-to-hand tactics, non-lethal strikes, and tactical shooting. Marcus finally charged at her. They clashed, former teammates now adversaries, skill against skill, training against training. Every blow carried years of shared experience and bitter betrayal. "You should have stayed hidden," Marcus spat. "I can't," she replied, delivering a calculated strike that forced him to the ground. "I won't let you win." Before he could recover, Megan sprinted toward the main control room, knowing Kane would be there. Every step was deliberate, every breath measured. The warehouse was a maze, but she knew it like the back of her hand, having memorized the security feeds. She burst into the control room and found Kane himself, tall, lean, with eyes like ice. He smiled faintly, as if he had expected her. "Walsh," he said, calm, composed. "I wondered how long it would take you to arrive. Your reputation precedes you." "You're done," Megan said, gun raised, voice steady. "It ends tonight." He laughed quietly. "You think you can stop me? You've been fighting shadows, Megan. I am the storm." She didn't flinch. "And storms can be weathered." Then Kane lunged toward a hidden trigger. Megan fired first, shattering his hand and stopping the activation. Sparks flew, alarms blared. She advanced, gun steady, eyes fixed. "Your empire ends tonight," she said. Kane gritted his teeth, taking a step back. "You're alone. This isn't the battlefield you're used to." "Alone," she said softly, almost to herself, "is when you're strongest." Outside, police and federal agents, tipped off by Rains, began storming the warehouse. Kane's men were quickly apprehended, some fleeing into the night. Megan secured the main control panel, ensuring that shipments, weapons, and bioweapons were locked down. Marcus, groaning from a wound in his side, crawled toward her. "You always were." "Better," he muttered. She looked down at him, eyes hard. "You could have chosen right." "You didn't?" With that, Kane was cuffed, Marcus incapacitated, and Black Tide's immediate threat neutralized. Megan stepped outside onto the pier. The first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon. For the first time in days, she exhaled. Her fight was far from over, but tonight she had won. She looked out over the water, wind whipping her hair. She had faced betrayal, threats, and a criminal empire. But she had proven again that a SEAL's resolve was unstoppable. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to hope. The harbor was quiet again. Dawn had settled into a crisp morning, mist hovering over the water like a lingering memory. Megan Walsh stood at the edge of the pier, the remnants of Black Tide's chaos still smoking in the distance. The warehouse, now secured by law enforcement, was silent except for the occasional flicker of emergency lights. For the first time in what felt like years, she could breathe without alertness knotting her stomach. The fight was over, for now. Federal agents and local police swarmed the docks, taking Maddox and Kane into custody. Marcus Duval, incapacitated but alive, had been transported to a secure facility for questioning. Megan watched the scene unfold from her truck. She hadn't spoken to anyone, didn't need to. Words were unnecessary. Her actions had spoken for her. Precise, deadly when necessary, unflinching, yet controlled. For the people at the docks, she was both a hero and a force to be reckoned with. Some would never forget her. Others would whisper about her legend for years. But Megan wasn't interested in legend. She returned to her cottage that morning. Everything looked the same. The wooden porch, weathered by the sea breeze, the small garden she tended with care, the smell of pine drifting through the open windows. Yet nothing felt entirely unchanged. She had changed, and so had the world around her. The peace she had sought for so long wasn't about avoiding danger. It was about confronting it on her terms. She unpacked her seal bag, laying out her gear methodically one last time. Every piece represented a chapter of her past, training, battles, losses, victories. She ran her hands over them, feeling the weight of history in her fingertips. Then she closed the bag and placed it in the trunk of her truck. Some things belonged in the past, but the lessons remained. The news coverage exploded that day. Headlines proclaimed, "Navy SEAL stops Black Tide Empire. Harbor saved from catastrophe." Videos circulated online, showing flashes of Megan's confrontations with Maddox and Kane. Unlike before, she didn't flinch at her face being shown to the world. She had earned it, not for fame, but because the world needed to know that someone could stand up to threats bigger than themselves. Her phone rang. Commander Rains. "Walsh," he said, voice calm, measured, but carrying a rare warmth. "I saw the footage. Impressive work, again." "I had no choice," Megan replied. "Choice," Rains said softly, "is what makes heroes rare. You could have walked away, but you didn't." She didn't respond immediately. Outside, the seagulls called, waves lapping gently at the pier. It was a different kind of battlefield now, quiet, patient, alive. "Thank you," she said finally, "for believing I could do it." Rains chuckled. "You don't need me to believe, Megan. You already do." The next few days passed in a blur of cleanup and testimony. Federal authorities dismantled Black Tide's operations. Maddox and Kane's assets were seized. Associates were rounded up. Megan provided insight into their tactics, strategy, and connections, not as a soldier under orders, but as someone who had lived this life. She watched as the men she had once served with, the loyal, honorable ones, finally brought justice to those who had betrayed their code. For the first time, she felt a sense of closure, not just on the mission, but on the ghosts she had carried from her SEAL past. One evening, she walked along the pier, alone. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Waves licked the pilings, and the air smelled of salt and rain. She stopped at the edge, hands in her pockets, and stared at the horizon. For years, the ocean had been both her training ground and her refuge. Now it was a reminder that life could be simple, peaceful, if she allowed it. A soft voice called her name. She turned to see Jack, the old dock worker. "You're really back, huh?" he said with a grin. Not just the girl from the stories. "I'm back," she replied, smiling faintly. Jack leaned on the railing beside her. "You sure this is the end?" Megan looked at the water. "It has to be," she said. "I can't fight every battle, every empire. But I can live my life knowing I stood when it mattered." Jack nodded, understanding. He didn't need to say anything more. Some things, courage, sacrifice, couldn't be put into words. That night, Megan returned to her cottage. She sat on the porch with a cup of tea, listening to the gentle hum of the harbor at night. The world was quiet. The wind moved softly through the pine trees. She thought about Maddox, about Kane, about Marcus, about every life she had touched, saved, or altered. And she realized something important. She had never stopped being a SEAL, not really. But now, she could choose when to be that person. Her phone buzzed, a single message from Rains. "You did good, Walsh. You always did." She stared at it, letting the words sink in. And then she put the phone down. Because the peace she had fought for wasn't in the absence of danger. It was in the ability to survive it, to rise above it, and to live despite it. Days turned into weeks. Business at the harbor returned to normal. Megan served her customers, smiled, and joked, letting life seep back into her veins like sunlight after a storm. But she kept one thing close. Her SEAL training, tucked away, but ready if the world ever needed her again. The lessons she had learned, courage, discipline, restraint, and strength, weren't just tools for battle. They were tools for living. And for Megan Walsh, that was the greatest victory of all. She walked down to the water's edge one evening, the sun dipping low, painting the sky in streaks of violet and gold. She knelt and let the waves touch her fingertips. "I'm here," she whispered, "and I'm at peace." The ocean whispered back, steady and endless, as if acknowledging her words. She stood, brushed the sand off her boots, and walked back toward her cottage. Behind her, the harbor gleamed the last light of day. Life went on. And so would she, stronger, wiser, and finally free.